Carol, she said once a year, sorority sisters are like to do it. Girls league. 10 or 12 girls maybe.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I've got a few corrections on the agenda. So when we, I guess, get to through citizens to be heard and approval of minutes, if you wanted to call on me, I've just got a couple of corrections to point out and one item that we're going to need to strike.
Okay.
So, and then as far as program reports go, Corey will do a parking report. And then if it's acceptable to the trust, I'll then make just a few general comments about the transportation report.
All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hey, Barney.
Yes. Hello.
I was laughing yesterday during that focus group at your background image. I was like, you got your own little BRT line going there behind you.
That's it. I wish you could see the whole picture because on out beyond the greenery is the Pacific Ocean.
Wow. Was that Costa Rica? Where is that?
No, it's in Maui.
Oh, nice.
Hawaii.
It's more of a PRT, a person rapid transit.
Yeah.
We could put that on the side of our BRT buses.
Only if Barney wants to pay for that.
Trustee Cooper, are you signing into PrimeGov?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Meg, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I like that that degree behind you. I'll scoot over so you can see what I have right above me.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I have
Hey,
an
Trustee
ally.
Cooper,
All right.
just a question. Are you in the special meeting
I'm in
in
the
PrimeGov?
Central Oklahoma Transport
You need to be in the special meeting.
Special. Well, I do think let me see. This is the link you all sent this yesterday, right? Special meeting.
I think you can go back one screen and go back in.
Okay, let's see.
They're talking about Prime Gov, Councilman, not on your Zoom meeting. You're in the right Zoom meeting.
Correct.
On my Prime, whoa, this is weird. I just signed out a live meeting.
Okay,
Oh, I see.
Jason, it's 9:03. Are we okay to start?
He's good. We got you, Mr. or Trustee Cooper.
Yep. We're okay from timing. Yes, sir.
All right, well, I will call our meeting to order. I want to tell everybody I'm glad to be back involved in the meeting. I appreciate Laura filling in for me when we were doing the meetings in person. A couple of them, Barney and I both just didn't feel comfortable in going to the meetings in person, but hopefully everybody gets vaccinated in the next, few months, everything will get back somewhat normal where we can have our meetings in person. So, but I do want to thank Laura for filling in. We have a new trustee, Meg, and she's there, and I asked her briefly before we got started in the meeting if she would share a little background with us and her thoughts on COPTA and just introduce herself.
Thanks for having me, Chairman. My name is Meg Mcelhaney. I live just a couple blocks south of the Capitol Hill neighborhood, right off of Walker. And I'm really excited to be here. Walker is a super busy street, so I firsthand noticed a lot of quirks of our city, especially in the area south of the river. So this was a great opportunity. I am currently the Senior Vice President of Operations at a local marketing and digital advertising firm here called Bridges Strategies. And we're in the B2B space. So lots of really interesting topics like insurance aggregators and accounting firms and stuff that is not the most exciting, but we really enjoy doing that. I grew up in Murray County in Southern Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma State University. And I also serve on the Oklahoma City Public Schools Board, representing District 7. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, welcome aboard. And I know Jason has kind of given you an introductory observation into COPTA. And as we go along, I'm sure you'll learn more and more about public transit and the parking garages in Oklahoma City. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Jason said he had a comment on citizens to be heard and approval of the minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Actually have three corrections to the agenda. On approval of minutes, item A there, the agenda reads that we're asking the trust to approve the minutes of the January 8th meeting. That is an error. It should be the February 5th meeting. Also on the agenda under items for individual consideration, we have one item that will need to be stricken, item D. This is the budget amendment item. We'll bring an item back in April, amending our budget. So we'd like to strike the one that's on the agenda today. And then item E reads a resolution of the City of Oklahoma City and the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. That item should just be a resolution of the trust. And so you should have been emailed a copy of the revised resolution this morning. And so we're treating this issue just as we would if we were meeting in person, where we would hand a corrected resolution out at the meeting. We simply emailed it this morning, so the corrected resolution will be available to the public once the meeting concludes. So wanted to just say to the trust this morning that I apologize for 3 of our 10 items either having to be corrected or removed from the agenda. I'll take full responsibility for those oversights as secretary of the trust, and we will enhance our review as we move forward. So again, apologies for basically a third of our items needing some type of correction or being removed from the agenda. With that said, following another review of the content this morning, the rest of the items are good to go.
Jason, I would like to ask our attorney whether or not we're in compliance with the Open Meetings Act if we change the way that the minutes item is stated, or if maybe we would be better to strike that and bring that back at our next meeting. Haley, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we could have the chairman make a motion to amend as staff recommends, and then vote on the vote on the amendment, and then vote on the minutes themselves. The other option, as you pointed out, is to strike and defer it to the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a preference on that? Would you
Well, I
like
mean,
to?
if Haley says that I can make them to amend it, there's no reason I can't just request that on that item and we go on and approve it.
Okay.
All right.
And then Haley, will we need to make a motion to strike item D and then make a motion to amend item E?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have 3 items for you, Mr. Chairman, that you'll need to ask for motions on to approve the changes to the agenda.
1-4A, then I would make the motion to amend it to reflect the February meeting.
But why don't we wait till we get to the individual
I'm sorry,
consideration?
stop right there. My bad. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right, no other comments. Then our consent docket, there are 4 items on our consent docket. Any items any of the trustees would like special mention, or can we approve the consent docket? Do I have a motion?
Okay, so I'm a little confused. I thought we were gonna do citizens to be heard and then approval of the minutes.
Oh,
And then,
excuse me. You're right. After Jason made comments on it, I just skipped over that. So sorry. Do we have any citizens to be heard? All right. Then I would have a motion to approve our minutes of our January 8th meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to amend it to reflect that it's our February meeting and not our January meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We need the second to make the motion in PrimeGov, please.
Arnie seconded it. Oh,
And I don't have, yes, okay.
Can't tell has everybody voted? Hey, all right. All right, the motion passes. Consent docket is approved with, or the minutes are approved. Now we can go to the consent docket, I guess. Any items any of the trustees would like discussion?
I'd like to move to strike item D from the consent docket.
Sorry to interrupt. We need to do another motion to actually approve. So that motion was to amend the minutes, and then you have to do a motion to approve as amended.
Thank you, Mickey.
Now, do I have,
February 5th minutes.
I'll second that.
motion passes. Now are we into the consent docket?
Trustee Sentner, we need you to vote.
Well, I'm sorry. Hold on just a second. How about that?
There we go.
All right. Now to our consent docket.
I'll move to strike item D from the consent docket.
All right.
Do you need a second for that?
Mr. Chairman, it's actually item D on the individual
consideration. Yes.
that we need to strike. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So all the consent dockets intact. Just need a motion to approve the consent docket. Okay. Motion passes.
May I ask?
All right, we're into individual considerations. Before we get into that, we need a motion.
We need everybody to vote on the consent docket.
May I ask a question? Oh,
yeah. I think Mr. Chairman, I think there's a question from one of the trustees. Trustee Cooper, I think if that's you, it's very hard to hear you. I don't know if
that's probably the first time anyone ever said it's hard to hear me. So
I'm sorry. I don't know if your mic is low or what. Okay.
I just noticed when we voted on the consent docket, it said underneath it amended, and I didn't know if that mattered. Like I didn't know if it was still showing like if we had.
That's going to be deleted.
Okay.
But we still need everybody to vote on the consent docket.
So we left D on then, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Not on the consent docket, did we?
Yes.
He said, he corrected that and said it's D on the individual consideration items that need to be stricken.
All right, then I guess if we're correct, the consent docket passes. All right, now under our individual consideration, we do need a motion to amend.
We're still waiting on votes for consent docket.
Mine shows all 8.
Trustee Bryant?
It's not showing up. I vote yay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, individual consideration. We need an amendment. We need a motion to amend item D.
Well, we really
To
don't need
delete it.
that.
Yeah.
Will be voted individually.
Do what?
We don't need a motion to amend anything right now because each item will be voted individually.
Oh, all right. Then item A, amendment to the agreement with the city of Edmond to provide disbursement of CARE Act funds. Jason, if you'd like to comment on that.
Yes, sir. A few comments for the trustees on this one. As most of you are familiar, we have an agreement with the city of Edmond where we designate the city of Edmond as a subrecipient to COTPA for FTA grant funds. As you're aware, grant funds that are awarded to COTPA from the FTA are for the urbanized area. And with Edmond providing transit in the same urbanized area as COTPA, we've historically entered into agreement to direct through a subrecipient agreement with Edmond, direct some of those funds for transit in Edmond. And we base that apportionment, if you will, off of a table that the FTA publishes. And again, work with the city of Edmond regularly on those funding amounts. And so really what this item here is doing is amending that current agreement we have and accounting for CARES funds. So just like we received $24 million of CARES funds for our system, the city of Edmond is receiving $2 million for theirs. So so the item that's before you is simply an amendment to that agreement between COTPA and Edmond as a subrecipient of FTA grant funds, which will allow us to direct the CARES apportionment to them, their apportionment of the CARES funds. I should say the amount is listed there on your memo. It's $2,036,748. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by any of the trustees? Yeah, I have a motion to approve item A. All right, we have a motion and a second. Everybody would vote.
Mickey, I'm not getting the opportunity to make seconds or votes, but I vote yes.
Okay, Brent, try pressing escape on your keyboard. It may just be that your Zoom is full screen.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Motion passes.
It worked.
Item B is an amendment to the contract for engineering services for the Northwest Bus Rapid Transit Project.
Right, and so I know that we've heard a lot from HNTV lately with our updates on the Northwest BRT. And so I know the trust is familiar with HNTB and the work they're doing. This is an amendment to their contract, increasing the contract by $20,220. And we're asking, in return for that contract increase, we're asking for additional, basically surveying and right-of-way work associated with 6 different locations along the route. And those 6 locations are listed at the bottom of your memo. And so with approval of this item, we'll be able to direct our engineering firm to continue to move ahead with the right-of-way and surveying necessary for the 65% version of the plans, and then finally final plans.
All right, any questions? I would make mention this time we did have a Zoom meeting on the branding with our firm, and I thought it was a pretty successful meeting, and a lot of opinions were expressed. So, all right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Your vote. Chairman, we're waiting on your vote.
Tried to do it a couple of times. Okay, there it goes. All right, motion passes. Item C is change order number 11 to the Convention Center parking garage and accepting the project and placing the maintenance bond into effect. Jason?
Yes. So as mentioned, this will conclude the construction of our Convention Center parking garage. This is our final change order number 11, along with final accepting the project, putting the maintenance bond into effect. A couple of things I would want to mention to the trustees as we officially wrap this project up from a procedural standpoint. Although we are looking at our 11th change order, and it is in the amount of just over $29,000. With those 11 change orders combined, we still basically our total combined change orders were less than 2% of our original contract amount. So, at least in my opinion, for a construction project of this size, just over $24 million, I think, the entire team, all the way from the staff to the architect to the contractor, did a really good job managing within that contract budget. So appreciate that. Of the change order that's before you today, you can see that the majority of that $29,000 cost is attributable to the tiles that we're using for the art piece associated with the garage. We are recommending that we purchase any leftover tiles. That's about $24,000 of the $29,000 associated with this change order, so that in the event we have to replace any of those tiles in the years to come, we have that back stock. So we'll have the exact, colors that the tiles are, the exact materials. And so although we don't anticipate, we hope we don't have to do a lot of maintenance on the art. If something were to happen and we did have to replace some tiles, we would have adequate stock to do that. The other pieces of the change order are relatively minor. We added 12, I believe it was 12 additional bollards throughout the garage. And then there was about $1,000 attributable to some changes in the dedication plaque. With that, with approval of this item, it will close this project out.
Jason, is the artwork completed on the outside facade?
You know, I think they are still working on the, I guess it would be the west side, but I know Corey is on the line. Corey?
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, please. Is it?
We actually finished the very last tile last week.
Okay.
So the art is complete.
Thank you, Corey.
I will add, if you go down there and you get the opportunity to park and walk around, the artwork is stunning, and it changes as you walk down the block. Your view of the colors, the brightness of them, and the effect of the figures in the artwork are just beautiful. But it's really best, you can see it when you drive by. It's very pretty, but it's really amazing when you're walking on the street level.
Really puts some interesting colors in the garage as well.
Yeah, I haven't been in the garage since the art was up.
It's really
neat. The light shining through.
Corey, one other question. What's the status of the apartment project?
The last I heard, which is a couple of months ago, sir, that they plan on beginning construction here in a couple of months. But that was all, there was caveats to that based off of the HUD and whatnot.
Okay.
I'll follow up for you.
All right. Do we have a motion to accept item C? All right. You all can vote. All right, motion passes. Now item D, we need a motion to delete item D until possibly the next trust meeting. We have a motion in a second. Motion passes. Item E, as Jason prefaced, that he's amended some of the language in that. If you'd like to go over that one more time before we vote on it, Jason.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, apologies for a corrected resolution, but the resolution that was in your packet and the memo, the title of the memo indicates that this is a resolution of the City of Oklahoma City and the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. And I just want to be real clear, this is simply a resolution of the COTPA Trust. Now, what we're asking the trust to do through resolution is appoint a surrogate administrator and secretary for future trust meetings in the event the administrator or secretary is unable to attend. And what really brought this to head or to my attention is there's a required training that I need to be at in April that conflicts with our April trust meeting. And of course, rather than asking the trustees to rearrange their schedule or move the meeting, we approached our municipal counselor's office and asked if there was a mechanism to allow basically someone to fill in for me in this case as secretary and administrator for a trust meeting. And so the resolution that you have before you is really that tool or that mechanism. It's essentially record of the board taking action to name a surrogate. And that has been vetted through a couple of different attorneys, Haley especially within the municipal counselor's office, and all have determined, this is an appropriate mechanism to do that. So really what the resolution lays out for you is in the event the administrator or secretary is unable to be at a trust meeting, then the assistant director of administration would step in and fill that surrogate role. And then in the event for some reason, both the director and the assistant director of administration were unable to convene or attend a trust meeting, then the assistant director of operations could do that. I tell you, I don't plan on hopefully ever having to miss another meeting, but at the same time, and just in terms of continuity of operations planning, we're recommending this resolution be approved by the trust, so we have that mechanism in place. And then while we're talking about that, just to let the trust know that in my absence in April, Suzanne Wickenkamp, our Assistant Director of Administration, will be serving as the surrogate secretary and administrator if this item is approved. So she'll be available to assist with the April meeting.
All right, thank you. Any questions by any of the trustees? And I have a motion to approve item D.
I move to amend the resolution.
Okay.
Brent seconded. And motion passes. All right, item E. As Jason said, we'd like to need a motion to amend that item and strike it from the individual considerations until probably the next meeting. So
I think we're on E now, aren't we?
Yep.
So we just voted to amend E to remove the city of Oklahoma City. So now we would be voting to adopt E as amended.
all right.
Yep, exactly.
So we have a motion and a second. All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Laura. Okay, now we're to item E, to a motion to amend, to strike item E from the individual considerations.
No, we just voted on E, we corrected it. So now we're on to ratification of claims.
Yep.
All right, we are at ratifications of claims and payroll. Any items on there any of the trustees would like discussion? If not, I'd have a motion to ratify. Motion passes. All right, we're on to our financial reports, COTPA schedule of revenue and expenditures, budget to actual for the month ended January 31st. Jason, if you have any comments.
I do have some comments for the trust, and I also wanted to point out that we have the financial report for the COTPA Employee Retirement Trust also included in the packet, and this is the financial for the pension through the first half of the fiscal year. So basically ending December 31st. We don't get these financials other than a couple of times a year. So it's not a typical report that you see in your packet. If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, when I conclude the comments on the budget to actuals, I'll make a few comments on the pension financial as well.
All right, that's fine.
So starting with the budget to actual, page 2, this is our transportation operations. Essentially looking at total revenues and total expenses, you can see that we're basically right on budget overall with both, in that our total revenues about 169,000 less than we had projected, but still 99% of our budget. Our total expenditures are 231,000 less than what we had estimated, or about 98.7% of our budget. So overall, revenues and expenditures are pretty much tracking right where they need to be. However, there are some nuances in the expenditure budget categories that I wanted to make the trustees aware of. And I think I would start, if I could direct your attention to the personal services line under the expenditures heading. This is really where we budget and spend funding for salaries and wages primarily. And so if you look, you'll notice that we're at about 103%, so about 3% over what we had estimated, which is about $372,000 more in expenses than what we had budgeted through January 31st, or 7 months of the fiscal year. So there's a couple of things driving that that we've looked at, and I want to commend staff for doing some pretty rigorous analysis and coming up with some year-end projections for us over the last couple of weeks. But there are a couple of things driving that. One is in February, on the COTPA side of our operations, we actually had 3 payrolls. And when we were putting our budget estimate together, we didn't estimate a full, 3 payrolls in February. So that's inflating the numbers a bit, right? So as we get back to the rest of the year, having just 2 payrolls per month, that overage that you see will diminish and flatten out a bit. However, we do expect at the end of the year to be over budget, potentially over budget, on our salaries and wages, due primarily to overtime and basically operating in our pandemic environment. And I'll expand on that. We take every single precaution we possibly can with any employee that becomes sick or even has to be quarantined because they may have been in close proximity with someone who's sick. And as we know through the different leave programs that COTPA, the city, the federal government have put in place, we're able to continue the salary for those individuals, right, that are either quarantined or ill. But in order to make up and still be able to put the service on the street, if you will, we're having to use other employees, and that usually means overtime. So people are at home where they should be in a quarantine situation, still able to have salary continuation, but in order to deliver that service, we're paying overtime to do it. So, that's really what's driving those salary numbers overall to be a little bit higher than what we had budgeted. Now, in the past, we've talked about overtime. We typically have quite a bit in overtime expenditures, but a lot of times that overtime is driven because we have vacancies, right? We have vacant operator positions or vacant mechanics, and that kind of offsets. Well, in the pandemic environment that we're operating in, we haven't had an opportunity to offset all of those overtime costs. So I know that's a long explanation, but I wanted to be able to let you know that we have thought through it, we have looked at it, we've analyzed it. We don't anticipate finishing $372,000 over budget at the end of the fiscal year, but will we be somewhere around 200, 250? That's certainly a possibility. However, we don't anticipate having to amend our budget from the standpoint of increasing it. And the reason I say that is I can direct your attention to the other expenditure categories, whether it be other services and fees, and in particular fuel, where we have savings that we'll be able to essentially transfer budget to that personal services line. So again, appreciate the time to give such a detailed explanation, but I just want to let you know that we are monitoring it. We have a solution. We may finish over on salaries and wages, but we don't anticipate it pushing our overall budget past what the trust has approved. And I'll pause there if there's any questions, or otherwise I'll move right on to the parking operations financial. So if I could direct your attention then to the parking operations financial on page 4. Again, sharing with you a lot of the information, same information that I've shared with you in the past in terms of underperformance on revenues. You can look at our monthly contract revenue, our transient revenue, and our event revenue, and you'll notice that each one of those is essentially underperforming our budget, with really the most dramatic impact to our revenue coming in the form of events, or I should say lack of events. We virtually have no event revenue for the fiscal year. And of course, we heard just this week that, the Oklahoma City Thunder doesn't plan to have any fans at games the remainder of this season. So any event revenue that we might have thought we were going to generate at the end of the fiscal year, likely not to occur. Events like the Arts Festival are being pushed out, further. So the budget amendment that we'll present in April, and just as I've mentioned in months past, the budget amendment that we present in April will account for really reconciling our budget with that diminished revenue. But then at the same time, we're also being as frugal as we possibly can on the expenditure side. So we're not spending as much either, right? I mean, if we manage events, we have labor costs associated with the events. So there's kind of a trade-off there. And that if we don't have the events, we are seeing some savings on labor. So we'll be able to come back to you with a budget amendment that will reduce not only the revenues, but will also reduce the expenses. Now, will we be able to reduce the expenses, low enough to align with our revenues? Not likely. We are looking, and I know I mentioned this before, but we are looking at spending right around $400,000 or so of our reserves this year in order to balance our budget. So finishing up the discussion then on the parking operations, the one thing the additional thing I wanted to point out to you on the expenditures is in the parking garage operations, you can see that our variance is $467,000 to the good. However, I'll direct your attention to footnote 2 on the financial, which indicates that those expenditures you see on this financial report are only through invoices paid through November. So we actually have about roughly $237,000 of outstanding expenses that should be rolled into the expenses that are on this budget to actual. Again, necessitating a need for a budget amendment. And then just finally, I'll finish up on page 7. This is our schedule of revenues and expenditures for streetcar operations. Again, directing your attention to the revenues to begin with. Through 7 months of the fiscal year, we're about $180,000 less than what we anticipated in revenue. Most of that really, or I should say, half of that anyway, is a result of streetcar fares continuing to come in under budget. And that's certainly not a surprise with the ridership trends that we see on our streetcar operations. The one, positive part of our revenue situation is that advertising is pretty much holding to what we had budgeted. And of course, on the streetcar operation, the advertising is really those sponsorships at our stop platforms. We have, in most cases, multi-year contracts. And so, really a big, thank you, if you will, to our sponsors for sticking with us and keeping those multi-year contracts with us, certainly helping with revenue outside of the general fund. Looking down at the expenditures, you can see we're pretty much right in line with budget on our expenditures. I'm basically right where we expected to be. We do have a December invoice for Herzog that is outstanding. But other than that, all invoices for Herzog are paid current and reflected in the financial. So I'll pause there if there's any questions on the budget to actual, on anything I've mentioned or any of the other reports. And if no questions, I'll move into just a couple of comments on the pension financial.
Jason?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me pretty well? Is my mic, is my audio good?
Yeah, yes, it's better. It cut out a couple times, but it's better.
2 questions. One, do we have any data yet on, like, for instance, when our streetcar service began, what recruiting looked like and bringing on new operators to our system versus what recruitment of operators has looked like during the pandemic? Like, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Are you asking about like numbers? Like, in other words, how many did we have to recruit when we began service versus like how many did we recruit in the last fiscal year? Like number of positions?
Yes, yes. I'm just really interested in, I guess because fire and police have been on my mind in terms of their recruitment efforts, and especially right now during the pandemic. So I'm just wondering, have we been just thinking about that overtime conversation and stuff? Like, what does recruitment and retention look like of our operators right now, both for bus and streetcar service? And the reason why I mentioned the launch of Streetcar is it would just strike me that at that time we were probably reintroducing to our residents the idea that transit was not what they had expected and come be a part of this sort of new thing. So I don't know. I'm just curious what this looks like right now. That's my first question.
Sure. And if I could just respond to that one first, I can certainly get you those numbers. Turnover and recruiting are something that, you know, we are keenly aware of from the staff perspective. I mean, our HR team here for the bus operations anyway, we really are in a constant state of recruiting. And that's not uncommon in the transit industry. It's well, actually, you could expand that even to any industry that requires professional CDL operators. It's kind of a constant state of recruitment. But we can certainly do some comparisons for you and look at like turnover and number of, I guess, new employees recruited and do that comparison. I would like to mention on the bus side, because you mentioned the bus side of our operations, we've actually been very I don't know if fortunate's the right word, but maybe it is. Actually, maybe I would say our staff has done a really, really good job of keeping our bus operator positions filled during this pandemic. I mean, there's been a few times this year where we've essentially been full on bus operator positions. And we now have I believe we have more mechanics now, more mechanic positions filled, which is another very difficult position to fill than we probably ever had. A lot of that has to do with the fact that some of the mechanics that have come to us have, been in an industry that has seen some cutbacks. So overall, it's actually been a good year for us for recruiting. But I'll get you those numbers.
Well, and Jason, also to point out that the streetcar operators are recruited and retained by Herzog. So you can probably get numbers, but that's not something that your HR staff engages in.
Yes, thanks for clarifying, Trustee Johnson. Yeah, the Herzog, they're not our employees, so we don't have privy to quite the information we do on the bus side, but we'll see what we can come up with for you.
And then I'm interested in the ridership numbers over the last year for both the streetcar and the buses. We don't have right now present that, but I'm very interested in that.
Sure.
And I'm particularly interested in, I just reflect back on the survey. Whenever we go out and do that sort of customer service survey, I'm just thinking very specifically about who's using our system as, a connecting thread to employment. And so I'm very interested in who those folk were who, during a pandemic needed that service and still relied on us for that service. So I would love to kind of get a better sense of that.
I think in my comments I had prepared about the transit system report, I think I can touch on, in fact, I'd planned on touching on that in terms of, what we're seeing for ridership in several of our modes. And so if I could share those comments then, and then definitely any follow-up questions, I could take at that time or get you whatever data you need to look at. And it's interesting, you mentioned the survey. We actually had a discussion, I believe this week. Yeah, it was this week, Monday. We're looking at we just got the preliminary results of our customer survey and our non-rider survey, and we're reviewing those with the we plan to bring those back to the trust, those final survey results either in May or June. And so not only will we be able to look at satisfaction ratings during this pandemic, but like you said, also some demographic information and what they're using our services for, trip purpose and such.
Thank you.
Okay, so give me one moment and I will be back at our pension financial. I won't spend much time on this, Mr. Chairman, but did want to direct the trustees' attention to probably first page, which is management discussion and analysis of the COTPA pension plan. I always find really the bullets under the financial summary to be the most helpful if you're looking just, okay, what's the overall health of the pension or what has changed from year to year? And I'll just talk real briefly about two of the bullet points under the financial summary on page 1. The first bullet, which indicates our net position in the pension, you can see that it's increased by about $2.2 million when you compare December 31st of 2019 to December 31st of 2020. And then I know the other data point that the trustees are always very interested in, and rightfully so, and so is the committee, is that funded ratio. And we continue to either make progress or maintain a relatively stable funding ratio. So, it wasn't too many years ago, we were looking at our funding ratio, wondering how we could get it up to 80%, right? Which was kind of the bare necessity for a healthy pension. And so now here we are at the end of 2020, maintaining a funding ratio of about 83%. So that is down slightly from 84% the previous year, but that does fluctuate a bit depending on the number of people we have in the pension, which changes our liability, right? And then also, of course, the performance of the investments. I will mention that we do have 16 more members in the pension plan this year than we did at the same time last year. So that's certainly a contributor to that funding ratio declining just a bit. But anyway, I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have on the pension.
Jason, you mentioned that 80% goal once upon a time. Can you remind us, and maybe there's like what we expect to see across the industry kind of standard, but what kind of goal do we have in mind right now? I remember once upon a time as having maybe a bit higher than 80, but I can't remember.
Yeah, well, trying to think, it was probably, I'd say roughly 5 to 6 years ago, our pension wasn't at 80%. It was, we've slowly increased the funding ratio. But I know that at that time, we as or should say you as a trust, based on, some recommendations and some advice from our actuary, we really had that discussion of, before we make any changes to the pension plan, benefits to employees or whatever, really we needed to get 80% or better funded. And so other than it, I'm not aware, I don't recall a goal being any higher than 80. We kind of said we need to get to 80, and then whatever we do, whatever changes we might make to the pension, we don't want to do anything to go below that. And ideally, we would continue to enhance that funding ratio. And we've been able to do that. So although we haven't had to my knowledge, a goal north of 80%, once we hit that 80, we've been able to maintain above that kind of that minimum goal. So I hope that answers your question in terms of what our goal is and did we have a goal above 80? And then as far as what pensions look like, industry wide, I mean, I think we're in a pretty, just speaking of pensions in general, I think we're in pretty good shape to be, 80% funded or more. I mean, I'm sure.
Jason, if I could just.
Yeah, please.
Councilman Cooper, our goal is always to get to 100%. That will always be my goal, to get to 100% over time. It doesn't happen overnight. You have good years financially, bad years financially with your investments, and the actuary tries to smooth that out over a period of time, so you don't have drastic changes each year. But I can get you a report that I get. I'm also an Oklahoma State Firefighters pension representing OML, and I've got a report just recently about kind of pensions in Oklahoma, and I can kind of give you an example. The police pension is over 100%, where the fire pension is at 70-some%, but it was lower than that. So, our pension for our employees for the city, it's around 94-95% right now. So, I can get you that. I can get you some data on that, and I think it'll be helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate Jason's clarification on that 80%. That rings right. And then B, yeah, any sort of context that like you're providing, Brent, that's very helpful. Just wanting to learn a little bit more about where we set with it. So thank you.
And to ask a question, our streetcar operators are not in this pension program. You said there were 16 new people in the program, but it's not offered to the streetcar operators because they're Herzog employees. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, if there's no other questions, then I'd have a motion to receive our financial reports. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Our program reports, and Jason said Corey had a report on parking, and then he'd make a couple comments on transportation. So,
yes, sir.
Corey, if you'd like to give us your report.
This will be quick and to the point in order to save time for everybody. In the month of December, we had just over 3,600. We had 3,688 actual garage and surface lot spaces with an occupancy of 58%. In January, we opened up our brand new convention center garage with 11,006 spaces. We got an extra 6 spaces due to
Mr. Hubbard, we cannot see your presentation. You need to share your screen.
Thought I was.
Please.
Sorry, I didn't hit complete.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Thank you for correcting me. All right, so here's our numbers in December with 3,688 spaces, the occupancy of 58 spaces. In January, we opened up the new convention center garage, raising our total number of spaces by 1,106. And adding 635 monthly parking spaces. Where we got that number from was the future apartments, some upper management spaces for the Omni Convention Center and apartments, and then the Omni valet operations.
Hey, Corey, could you refresh my memory? What is the Santa Fe Station East, the 73 spaces? What is that?
That's a lot that we leased from the city a few months ago. Okay. It's just, it's in Bricktown by the candy factory.
Okay, I'm with you. All right, thank you. I like your occupancy there. That's good. Good job. Can you get some more like that? No.
Always trying, always trying. So the 230 spaces in the convention center, that's just the Omni Valet operations. And then we have a 36% occupancy there. In the coming months, we'll add the Scissortail Park lot. And we are talking to folks about monthly parking out there too. On to the bad news. The winter storm damage broke our chilled Veolia lines in the Sky Bridge that connected the Santa Fe garage to the hotel. That has been demoed. We've removed all the flooding, ice, water, carpet, and ceiling tiles, and some sheetrock. The Century Center garage, we had a dry fire line break on the 4th floor of the garage and flooded our elevator shaft and froze those elevators in place. The Arts District garage, its elevators froze in place due to the brakes freezing. All the elevators in our system are back up and running. In the tenant space, we had a dry fire line break and flood the Philharmonic, which leaked into Canterbury and the clinic. And then we had a domestic water line break in humanities space. All the demo has been taken care of, and we are seeking bids to have repairs made.
Is that covered by insurance?
An insurance claim will be filed by the city globally.
Okay. And although we sold the Santa Fe garage, we still own the Sky Bridge next to it?
Correct.
And we will forever, I guess, own that?
We're trying to
well,
Go ahead, Jason.
we're looking, yeah, we're looking at some options to surplus the property, if you will, but right now we're still responsible for it.
And is it open to the public?
Right now it is not because of the demo work.
Otherwise, yes, it does provide a public connection from the Santa Fe garage to the hotel.
Okay. And it's been closed on over to the former Cox Convention Center?
Yes.
Yes.
And you can no longer access the Cox Convention Center from that facility, from that.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Corey, is that your report, Corey?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just, before I get into the comments on the transportation report, I do want to just thank the city's risk management team for helping us out, particularly with the Arts District damage. So we really appreciate those guys helping us. And then Public Works also has been, in lockstep with us in terms of advising us on the appropriate demo and corrective construction action to, restore that space. So definitely a team effort. I know Corey's had his hands full managing it, but we've got a lot of good interdepartmental cooperation and helping us get it right. And also, I should say, too, that we really appreciate the patience of our tenants. We appreciate our tenants. We're glad they're occupying that tenant space in the Arts District garage, and we are trying to get it fixed as soon as we possibly can. We know it's a huge inconvenience for them. We're sensitive to that.
All right.
Okay, so have a few comments on the transit system report. I know it's as you know, you get it every month. It's several pages and links. So I just wanted to hit the highlights, and I think this will answer some of the questions Trustee Cooper had just in terms of where are we at overall ridership. So what I'll do is I'll talk about, if I can, percentage changes in our average daily ridership in January of 2021 compared to a look back a year ago in January. And this information is all in your report, along with more data in terms of riders per service hour and cumulative trips, but I thought the percentages would help put it in perspective. So if we started with just our fixed route, Monday through Friday service, our ridership is down about 43% from what we experienced last year at this time. Our weekend ridership is down about 38% from what we experienced a year ago. And so that's, really the main transportation modes we have is that fixed route Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends. Now, if you look at our plus ridership, which is our ADA transportation, it's down about 32%. And then our mobility management, which is really those services for our seniors, whether it be, transporting meals or non-emergency medical appointments or those types of services, those trips are down 25%. So I guess one of the takeaways, excuse me, before I get into that, and then streetcar ridership is actually down 73% from where it was a year ago. So I think to kind of get to Trustee Cooper's question or comment earlier, like, what types of trips are we providing? Are they, still are they trips for essential workers, people needing to get to work? Two things. One, those numbers reflect obviously us providing those services in a pandemic environment. And in that pandemic environment, we have continually had capacity constraints on our equipment. And we've continually tried to promote use transit only for essential trips. So obviously that's part of what's driving those numbers. But then when you look at the plus, the ADA transportation, and then that senior transportation, those particular areas of our family of services, they've seen the least amount of decline, which again, most of those customers for those services, in many cases, don't really have any other transportation option. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that anecdotally, it appears that the plus and the mobility management, the senior trips that we provide, really are those essential trips for the most part, because we've seen the least amount of decline there. Whereas on the fixed route side, we've seen more decline. With that said, even with those percentages that I shared with you, cumulatively, we've still provided just under 1.3 million passenger trips through 7 months of the fiscal year through our Embark family of services. And then one positive takeaway, certainly from the transit system report, is our on-time performance. And we've actually exceeded on-time performance on the fixed route side every month of this fiscal year compared to the previous fiscal year. And in January, we were at 74.5% on-time performance. And again, that's measured by all of our stops and time points within our system, and it compares to our goal of 75. So this is probably the best year we've had in terms of on-time performance, if you would like a positive takeaway from the report that's before you. And you're going to learn as we share survey results with you in the future that that's becoming more and more of a important satisfaction rating for our customers. In fact, we heard from our customers that on-time performance is becoming more and more important. So, so with that, I also wanted to, if I could, just and I know I'd already provided an update to the trustees, but just, coming off the winter weather we had roughly, I guess, 2 weeks ago now, that week of February 15th through the 19th, wanted to just provide you with a couple of updates related to transportation that you won't find in the report. And one of those is that during that time period, we provided over 1,900 emergency, I guess I would call it emergency shelter trips. Basically, this was us using our buses to provide transportation to people to warming centers or shelters in the city. Also wanted to mention that even though our mobility management services were canceled during that week, and again, this is our service catering mainly to our seniors, staff did really an incredible job of really trying to fill the gap for those essential trips where people had no other option. Despite the fact that those mobility management services were canceled, we were able to coordinate with our Embark Plus service. We provided at least 5 dialysis trips that otherwise customers would not have been able to make. We took several of our ADA customers to warming centers. And I thought this was really neat. This is, and again, just really credit to staff. They were able to really make a call and check in with each one of our seniors that are registered in our customer base, just to determine really their well-being, safety, if there was a vital trip need that they had. So just really wanted to recognize staff for that. And then something else that we've been doing through our mobility management services is providing vaccine trips for seniors. So if seniors have really no other option to get to a pod to receive the COVID vaccine, we are providing those trips free of charge. And through February, and we didn't start the trips for the entire month, but we've provided 39 of those vaccine trips using our mobility management services. So with that wraps up my comments related to our transportation services, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, first, well, it's not questions, just to make a comment. I think even with the decreases that we see here, it just, again, especially with the mobility services, speaks to the need that exists. And I only mention that largely because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the shelter in place conversation and enactment. So I think kind of reflecting on things is, something we should be doing right now. But also, I was at a neighborhood association meeting last night, and a couple of the residents were, who uses the bus sort of thing. Thankfully, another resident was like, hang on, I'll take it from here. And you gotta love Ward 2, I'm telling you. And so that was just really kind of heavily on my mind, because both that resident and myself, when we responded, we were like, now wait a second, let's be real here. So seeing those numbers are especially helpful. Every Friday at 11, as many of you know, metro area elected officials gather virtually to chat with Oklahoma City County health officials. And Jason, something they brought up last week was CityLink services, and how, as the vaccinations continue, some of the counselors there in Edmond were interested in talking with us at Embark about connecting people in terms of vaccinations, possibly using CityLink. So that might be worth reaching out to them if they haven't already reached out to us. But when you mentioned the vaccination thing, that came to my mind. And earlier in the agenda when we talked about and generally. So yeah, those are the main things. And otherwise, just thank you all for the work you did during the storm.
Jason, you might elaborate just a little bit about the plan to get back to a broader capacity on the buses?
Sure. Yeah, we've had discussions internally this week, not only with staff, but also with our union. And really this comes off the information that was provided to City Council on Tuesday, where the Oklahoma City County Health Department provided an update on, COVID cases. And, our takeaway and our position, at least from the staff perspective and working with the ATU on this, is that, we're really continuing to follow the health department's guidance. And if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to watch it, or we can certainly provide the presentation to you. But, the numbers, and I know we all follow this, but the numbers are encouraging, right? Especially when you see the trend and then you see the timing of when the vaccine was introduced. So it's very encouraging. However, the takeaway we have is really following the health department's advice, which was, although the numbers are encouraging, we need to maintain what we're doing for the time being, don't let up our guard, basically. And so as a transit agency, with safety of our customers and our employees, certainly top of mind, and working with our labor union, our goal is really to go ahead and continue to keep all of our capacity constraints in place for at least the next 30 days. And then at that point in time, revisit that discussion of increasing capacity on the buses and at transit facilities, but doing so incrementally. So if we were able to increase capacity, we may increase it by, say, 2 to 4 more passengers on a 40-foot bus, not just as many people that want to get on the bus as they can. So we'll look at an incremental approach, and really we'll work with the health department to get their opinion on our plan before we make any changes. And of course, the trustees will be fully informed. But all that said to say, we've talked about it. We're in a holding pattern for at least the next 30 days, then anticipate looking at potentially increasing capacity, but on an incremental basis.
All right, any other items from the trustees?
I would just like to welcome Meg to the trust, and hope you have a nice long tenure like Chris has.
Thank you. Thank you.
Meg, I kind of apologize. The meeting seemed to take a little longer than normal, but I think it's just because of the virtual situation we're in and not being able to see each other eye to eye and at the city council. And it makes it a little easier to conduct meetings when you can look everybody in the eye and see what's going on. So it just seemed like it was a little longer than normal.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, that was probably my fault. But speaking of keeping track, I'm making my notes. Did we take a motion to receive the reports?
No, I haven't got there yet.
Okay, all right. So, okay, I'll get out of your way. Thank you.
All right, I would have a motion to receive our program reports. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion passes. Laura, did you have one other comment?
No, I just wanted us to not forget the program reports before we adjourned.
Well, having missed a couple of meetings, I'm out of practice, so I did need your help. Okay. All right. Thank everybody. Stay safe.
Hello.
Hope everybody's been vaccinated.
So Councilman Cooper would like to add on something, I'm sure, under items from trustees.
Okay.
Just to say welcome aboard, Meg, which is my dad joke also. Welcome aboard. It's like anyway, transit. You're welcome for that.
Thank you.
You everybody. No, I've been a big fan of Meg's for a long time. I'm very much looking forward to the perspective she'll bring in regards to connectivity to the south side of our city, her advocacy for connecting folk to education opportunities, and quite frankly, I think Meg's social media marketing background is probably something that this board will find useful as well. So I think we have a bit of a triple threat there, and I'm honored to serve alongside her.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I will say, Meg, we talked about a female, but there was on city council a very influential female by the name of Meg that has retired. So you can hopefully follow in her footsteps.
Those are big shoes to fill. So we'll see.
All right, if there's no other comments, trustees, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for attending.